For 15 years, I believed the last thing my mother gave me was the trash bag I carried out the door the day after high school graduation. I was wrong. Yesterday, a certified letter arrived listing assets I never owned, proving that while I scraped by in a cold studio apartment, my identity was still working for the family that erased me. Now they want a reunion, but I am going back for the receipt. The phone on my desk did not ring. It buzzed against the laminated wood. A short, violent vibration that shattered the quiet hum of the logistics office. I stared at the screen. The area code was from Ridgehaven. I did not answer it. I let it vibrate until the screen went black, and then I waited for the inevitable notification that a voicemail had been left. It took 3 minutes. In those 3 minutes, I typed a shipping manifest for a truckload of ceramic tiles heading to Oregon, forcing my fingers to hit the keys in the correct order, forcing my breath to stay steady. I was 33 years old. I was the operations manager for Baylark Logistics. I paid my rent on the first of the month, every month. I had a fiancé named Mark who made coffee for me every morning. I was safe. But looking at that area code, I felt 18 again, standing on a porch with the humidity of a southern June clinging to my skin, holding a hefty bag filled with everything I owned. I picked up the phone and walked to the break room. It was empty. I pressed play. The voice was older, slightly raspy, but the cadence was exactly the same. Diane Cooper did not speak. She performed. "Sarah, it is Mom." There was a pause. It sounded wet, like she had just taken a sip of water to clear her throat. "I know it has been a long time, too long. I am calling because we are having a gathering next week. Just family. There are things we need to discuss. Important things. It is time to come home. Sarah, please call me back." She hung up. "No, I love you. No, I missed you." Just a directive wrapped in a tone that sounded unusually careful. It felt rehearsed. It sounded like someone reading a script they had not quite memorized, placing emphasis on the words family and important with a precision that felt surgical. I deleted the voicemail. I did not call her back. I went back to my desk, finished the manifest, and drove home to the apartment I shared with Mark. Our life in Baylark was modest. We rented the upper floor of a duplex that smelled perpetually of the bakery downstairs. It was not a glamorous life, but it was mine. I had built it from scrap. When I met Mark 3 years ago, I still kept a packed bag in the trunk of my car, a habit from my 20s when housing was a variable, not a constant. Mark was a mechanic, a man with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints and a dream of opening his own repair shop. I was quietly funneling $500 a month into a high-yield savings account for him, a surprise I planned to give him when he finally found the right building. I did not feel successful. I felt fortified. My life was a structure built to withstand a siege, but the siege began the next morning. It arrived at my office in the hands of our receptionist, a bubbly college student named Jenna. She waved a thick, rigid envelope at me as I walked in. "You got something fancy. Sarah," she said, "certified mail. You have to sign for it." My stomach turned over. Certified mail was never good news. It was tax audits, lawsuits, or eviction notices. I signed the little green card, my hand shaking just enough that the loop of my S looked jagged. I took the envelope to my office and closed the door. The return address was a bank in Ridgehaven, Ridgehaven Community Trust. I sliced it open. Inside was a stack of documents clipped together. The cover letter was brief, written in standard legalese. It stated that due to a compliance audit of dormant accounts, they required my immediate attention regarding a savings account ending in 4492, and a secondary verification for a home equity line of credit associated with a property on Elm Street. I read the sentence 3 times. Home equity line of credit. I did not own a home. I had never owned a home. I had never even been on a lease until I was 25. The letter referenced my full name, Sarah Elizabeth Cooper, and my social security number. It asked for a signature to update the terms of the existing agreement. I sat back in my chair, the paper trembling in my grip. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. 15 years ago, I had left Ridgehaven with nothing. I mean that literally. I had $200 in cash from graduation gifts that I had managed to hide in a hollowed-out textbook. I had no car. I had no bank account because my mother had never taken me to open one. The memory hit me then, not as a thought, but as a physical sensation. The smell of asphalt, the sound of crickets, the weight of the trash bag cutting into my palm. I was 18. It was 3 days after high school graduation. I had come home from a shift at the diner to find my room dismantled. Boxes were stacked in the hall. My bed was stripped. Diane was standing in the kitchen, wiping down the counter. She did not look at me when she spoke. "You are done here." "Sarah." I had laughed, thinking it was a joke. I asked her what she meant. She turned then. Her face was a mask of cold, hard porcelain. "You are 18. You are an adult. And you are ungrateful. I have done everything for you. And you walk around this house like you are better than us. Like you are too good for this family." I had never said that. I had never thought that. I had been a quiet kid, a straight-A student who kept her head down and tried to avoid the unpredictable storms of Diane's moods. "I am not kicking you out because I am cruel," she had said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was terrifyingly calm. "I am doing this to teach you. You need to learn what the real world is like. You need to struggle. It is the only way you will ever appreciate what I gave you." She handed me the box of trash bags. "Pack what you can carry. Kyle needs the room for his equipment." Kyle was 20. He had dropped out of college and was living in the basement. He was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose failures were always framed as bad luck or misunderstandings. I had packed the bag. I walked out the front door and down the driveway. I did not look back. I caught a Greyhound bus the next morning and never returned. Now, sitting in my office in Baylark, I looked at the bank logo, Ridgehaven Community Trust. If I had left with nothing, how did I have a dormant savings account? And more importantly, how was my name attached to a home equity line of credit on the house I had been thrown out of? I picked up my cell phone and dialed a number I had not called in 3 years. Kyle answered on the second ring. "Hello? Kyle, it is Sarah." There was a silence on the other end, followed by a sudden, jarring burst of noise, wind, or maybe traffic. "Sarah, wow. Hey, I heard Mom called you." His voice was too loud, too friendly. It lacked the natural hesitation of two siblings who were essentially strangers. "She did." I said, "But that is not why I'm calling. I just got a certified letter from the bank in Ridgehaven." The line went quiet again. I could hear him breathing. "Oh? What kind of letter?" "It says I have a savings account, and it says my name is on a loan against the house." Kyle laughed. It was a nervous, skittering sound. "That sounds like a mistake. Sarah, you know how small-town banks are. Their systems are ancient. They probably just got some files crossed because you used to live there. They have my social security number. Kyle, they are asking for a signature to update terms on a loan. Look, do not make things dramatic, okay?" The phrase made my teeth clench. Do not make things dramatic. It was the family motto. It was what Diane said when I cried after she forgot my birthday. It was what Kyle said when he broke my bike and lied about it. "I am not being dramatic," I said, keeping my voice low. "I am being legally notified. Does Mom know about this? She is really stressed right now. Sarah, she is planning this big thing for the town. Just ignore it, or sign it and send it back so they close the file. It is probably nothing, just a glitch. You want me to sign a document I do not understand? I want you to not cause a scene right before Mom's big week. Just come home for the dinner. We can look at it then." "It is probably a misunderstanding." I hung up. My hands were cold. Kyle was a terrible liar. He always had been. He spoke too fast when he was hiding something. Do not make things dramatic translated to do not look under the rug. I needed a second opinion. I called Marin. Marin Holt had been the only person I stayed in contact with from my old life. She had driven me to the bus station that morning 15 years ago. She was the one who had slipped me a $20 bill and hugged me while I cried. She answered immediately. "Tell me you did not call her back." Marin said, "Worse." I said, "I got mail." I explained the letter. I told her about the conversation with Kyle. Sarah, Marin said, her voice dropping an octave. That is not a glitch. That is financial abuse, or fraud, or both. I know. You cannot go back there thinking you are going to get an apology. You know that, right? Diane does not do apologies. She does rewrites. She will look you in the eye and tell you that you opened that account yourself and just forgot. I do not want her apology. I said. I looked out the window at the parking lot. I do not even want her love. Marin, I gave up on that a long time ago. Then what do you want? I want to know why. I said, I want to know why she threw me out with nothing if there was money in my name. I want to know why she looked at me like I was garbage while she was apparently signing my name on bank documents. I want the truth. Truth is expensive. Sarah, I know, but I think I'm already paying for it. I hung up and stared at my computer screen. I had 5 days of vacation time saved up. I had intended to use them for a camping trip with Mark in the fall. I opened the company portal and logged a request for 3 personal days, starting tomorrow. Then I opened a browser tab. I could have flown. I had the money now. A flight to the nearest regional airport would take 2 hours, followed by a rental car. It would be efficient. It would be comfortable. Instead, I booked a bus ticket. It was a reflex, a muscle memory from the years when a $100 plane ticket meant the difference between eating and starving. The bus was $40. It felt safer, somehow, to approach Ridgehaven the way I had left it, low to the ground, anonymous, and cheap. I went home early. Mark was in the kitchen, scrubbing grease off his forearms with orange pumice soap. He smiled when he saw me, but the smile faded when he saw my face. What is wrong? He asked. I have to go out of town for a few days. I said, Is everything okay? Is it work? No, it is family stuff. Mark froze. He knew about my family only in the abstract. He knew I was estranged. He knew they were difficult. I had never told him the details. I had never told him about the trash bag or the years I spent sleeping on friends' couches. I was afraid that if he knew how easily I had been discarded, he might wonder if there was something wrong with me, something broken that justified it. My mom called. I said, and there is some paperwork I need to clean up, old stuff, from before I left. Do you want me to come with you? No, I said too quickly. No, it is just boring administrative stuff. I will be back in 3 days. He looked at me for a long moment, the water running in the sink behind him. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over, kissing my forehead. Okay, call me if you need me. I packed the same duffel bag I used for the gym. I did not take much. Jeans, a blazer, in case I needed to look professional, the certified letter. The bus ride the next day was a 6-hour blur of highway medians and gray asphalt. I sat near the back, my headphones on but playing nothing. I watched the landscape shift from the industrial sprawl of Baylark to the rolling green hills that surrounded Ridgehaven. Ridgehaven was a valley town, isolated enough to feel like its own world, wealthy enough to pretend it had no problems. As the bus exited the highway and wound its way down into the basin, I felt a physical tightening in my chest, like a belt being pulled 1 notch too tight. The bus station had moved. It used to be a grimy shelter next to a gas station. Now it was a transit hub, a brick building with flower baskets hanging from the eaves. I stepped off the bus and the air smelled exactly the same, pine needles and damp earth. It was a smell I had associated with fear for 15 years. I walked toward the center of town. I needed to pick up a rental car I had booked on my phone. But first, I just walked. The town had changed. The rough edges had been sanded down. The old hardware store was now a boutique selling artisanal olive oil. The diner where I had worked for minimum wage was now a bistro with outdoor seating and string lights. Everywhere I looked, there were banners hanging from the lampposts. They were deep green with gold lettering. Ridgehaven Heritage Week. I stopped at a kiosk near the town square. Behind a plexiglass case, there was a poster for the Heritage Gala, a black tie event scheduled for Saturday night, sponsored by Ridgehaven Motors, the Kincaid Group, and Diane Cooper. My mother. I stared at her name. It was printed in elegant serif font. Diane Cooper was a sponsor. When I was a child, Diane constantly talked about how tight money was. We clipped coupons. We bought generic brands. If I asked for a new pair of sneakers, I was given a lecture on the virtue of frugality and the weight of the sacrifices she was making. We are struggling. Sarah, you have to understand that. Yet here was her name, listed alongside the biggest businesses in the county. A sponsor implies surplus. A sponsor implies status. I walked to the rental agency, picked up a compact sedan, and drove. I told myself I would go straight to the motel. I told myself I would not go there, but the car seemed to know the way. I turned left on Willow, right on Chestnut, and there it was, number 42 Elm Street. I idled at the curb, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The house was unrecognizable. When I lived there, it had been a beige ranch-style house with peeling paint and a hedge that was always overgrown because Kyle refused to trim it, and Diane refused to pay a landscaper. Now, it looked like a magazine cover. The beige siding was gone, replaced by crisp white clapboard. A new porch had been added, complete with rocking chairs and hanging ferns. The driveway was paved with pavers, not cracked asphalt. A sleek black SUV sat in the drive. It was a house that whispered wealth. It was a house that screamed perfect family. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They had not struggled, or if they had, the struggle had ended the moment I left. The renovation alone must have cost $50,000, maybe more. Where had that money come from? Diane had been a receptionist at a dental office when I left. Had she won the lottery? Had she remarried? Or had she always had it? The thought made me nauseous. I put the car in drive and pulled away before anyone could see me. I drove to the outskirts of town, to the budget motel that sat near the highway on-ramp. It was the only place in Ridgehaven that looked the way I remembered. Faded, slightly desperate, and cheap. I checked in. The room smelled of lemon cleaner and stale cigarettes. I threw my bag on the bed and sat down. I took the certified letter out of my bag. I had read the cover letter a dozen times, but I had not looked closely at the attachments. I flipped past the first page. The second page was a photocopy of a document titled Authorization of Collateral Assignment. It was dated June 14th, 15 years ago. That was the day after I left. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature line for the borrower. On the line, in blue ink that had been captured clearly by the scanner, was a signature. Sarah E. Cooper. I stared at it. I brought the paper closer to the lamp on the nightstand. It was my handwriting. The loops were mine. The slant was mine. It looked exactly like the way I signed my name when I was 18 years old, but I had not been there. On June 14th, I was on a bus crossing state lines. I was crying in a window seat, 300 miles away. I could not have signed this. I reached into the pocket of the folder and pulled out another sheet. This one was older. It was a signature card for a custodial savings account. Dated when I was 16. Diane Cooper was listed as the custodian. Sarah Cooper was the minor. I compared the signatures. The signature on the loan document from when I was 18 was identical to the signature on the savings account card from when I was 16. It was not just similar, it was identical. The spacing, the pressure, the way the R trailed off, it was a trace. Someone had taken my signature from the old savings account card and traced it onto the loan document. I sat alone in the dim motel room, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. My mother had not just kicked me out. She had not just erased me from the family photos. She had stolen my hand to sign away my future. I picked up my phone. I did not call Mark. I did not call Marin. I opened the camera app and took a picture of the document. Then I lay back on the bed and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. I was done being afraid. I was done being the girl who left with a trash bag. Tomorrow, I was going to the bank, and I was not going to be polite. The morning sun in Ridgehaven did not feel warm. It felt exposing. I dressed in the navy blazer and pressed slacks I had brought, smoothing the fabric over my hips in the motel mirror. I looked like a woman who handled logistics, a woman who managed shipping lanes and supply chains. I looked competent. Inside, I felt like a fraud walking into a trap set 15 years ago. I drove to Ridgehaven Community Trust at 9 o'clock sharp. The bank was a stone pillar of the community, sitting on the corner of Main and First like a fortress. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. I walked to the reception desk, clutching the certified letter so tightly the edges were beginning to curl. "I am here to see Lowell Brant." I said, "My name is Sarah Cooper." He sent me this, the receptionist, a young woman with acrylic nails that clicked against her keyboard, typed my name. Her eyes flicked up to me, then back to the screen. Her smile faltered. "One moment. Ms. Cooper, Mr. Brant is expecting you." She picked up the phone and whispered something I could not hear. A moment later, a heavy oak door opened, and a man in a gray suit stepped out. Lowell Brant was older than I expected, with thinning hair and the kind of forced, tight-lipped smile that people wear when they are afraid of a lawsuit. "Ms. Cooper," he said, extending a hand that felt damp. "Please, come in." His office was lined with framed certificates and photos of Little League teams. He gestured for me to sit. He did not sit immediately. He walked to the door and closed it, locking it with a soft click that echoed in the quiet room. "I appreciate you coming in person," he said, finally settling behind his desk. "We usually handle these compliance audits by mail, but given the age of the file, we thought it best to verify your identity face-to-face." I placed the letter on the desk. "Mr. Brant," I said, keeping my voice level, "I received this yesterday. It references a savings account and a home equity line of credit. I have never banked here. I have never owned a home. I want to know why my name is on these documents." Brant adjusted his glasses. He opened a file folder in front of him. He did not look at me. He looked at the papers. According to our records, the savings account was opened as a custodial account in 1998. Your mother, Diane Cooper, was the custodian. It remained active until you turned 18. "And then?" I asked. "And then the status changed to a joint checking account. And subsequently, your name was added as a guarantor on a home equity product secured by the property at 42 Elm Street." I stared at him. The room felt very small. "I did not sign those papers," I said. Brant cleared his throat. He turned a page in the file. "We have signatures on file. Ms. Cooper. They appear to match. I saw the photocopy." I said, "It matches a signature from when I was 60. I was 18 when that loan was originated. I was not even in the state. I was in a bus station in Kentucky, on my way to a job interview that did not exist. I was not here signing for a loan." Brant stopped moving. He looked up at me, and for the first time, the banker's mask slipped. There was genuine discomfort in his eyes. "Ms. Cooper," he said slowly, "this account has been flagged. That is why you received the letter. There was unusual activity noted during a recent internal review." "Define unusual." I said. "Movement of funds." He said. "The loan was drawn down significantly about 5 years ago, and then recently, there was an attempt to refinance. That is what triggered the compliance check. Because your name is still on the deed." "On the deed?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "My name is on the deed to my mother's house?" "Partial interest," he said. "It seems you were added to the title around the same time the loan was taken out. It is a common structure for family estate planning, or for securing favorable loan terms if the primary borrower has credit issues." I sat back, my head spinning. Diane had not just used my name to get a loan. She had anchored me to that house. She had woven me into the legal fabric of the property she had kicked me out of. "I want to see the transaction history." I said, "I want to see every withdrawal, every deposit, and every signature." Brant closed the folder. His politeness returned, rigid and cold. "I cannot provide the full history today. Ms. Cooper, the account is currently restricted pending this verification. If you are claiming fraud, that is a different process. That requires a police report." He looked at me pointedly. "Are you filing a police report against the co-borrower?" The co-borrower was my mother. He knew it. I knew it. If I filed a police report, I would be declaring war. I would be arresting the woman who is currently hanging banners for Heritage Week. I stood up. "I will let you know. Mr. Brant. But until then, I want a freeze on everything. No one moves a dime out of that account. If they do, I will sue this bank for negligence so fast your head will spin. I walked out before he could answer. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the car door. I needed air. I needed space. But mostly, I needed proof that did not rely on Lowell Brandt's carefully curated files. I drove to the county records office. It was located in the basement of the courthouse, a room that smelled of dust and decaying paper. I filled out a request form with a trembling hand, asking for all public records associated with Sarah Elizabeth Cooper and the address on Elm Street. The clerk, a bored woman chewing gum, handed me a stack of papers 20 minutes later. I took them to a wooden table in the corner and began to read. It was all there, a map of my financial life that I had never walked. There was a quitclaim deed, transferring a 10% interest in the property to me when I was 18. There was the deed of trust for the home equity line of credit, signed by Diane Cooper and Sarah Cooper. And then, I found something else, a lien release. It was dated 3 years ago. It referenced a mechanic's lien against the property, a debt that had been unpaid for work done on the house. The lien had been paid off and released. The check used to pay the lien was referenced in the notes. Check number 402 from AXT, ending in 4492. That was the savings account. The dormant one. I felt bile rise in my throat. The money in that savings account, wherever it had come from, had been used to pay off debts on the house, my money, or money that was legally mine. I realized with a sick, sinking feeling that my clean break had been financed by my own identity. I had been eating ramen noodles and working double shifts at a warehouse in Baylark, terrified of missing a rent payment, while my credit score was being leveraged to renovate the kitchen I was not allowed to enter. I left the courthouse and got back in my car. I was not sad anymore. The sadness had evaporated, leaving behind a hard, cold anger. I drove to Ridgehaven Motors. The dealership was on the strip of highway leading out of town. It was a sprawling complex of glass and steel, with rows of polished trucks and SUVs gleaming under the midday sun. Ridgehaven Motors was written in chrome letters above the showroom. Kyle worked here as the sales manager. It was a good job, a job that commanded respect in a town like this. I parked my rental car next to a massive red pickup truck and walked into the showroom. The air conditioning was freezing. A young salesman in a cheap suit approached me, but I brushed past him. "I see him," I said. Kyle was standing in a glass-walled office at the back, laughing with a customer. He looked successful. He was wearing a tailored suit, his hair styled, a gold watch glinting on his wrist. He looked like the man of the house Diane had always wanted him to be. He looked up and saw me. The laughter died in his throat. He said something to the customer, shook his hand, and hurried out of the office. "Sarah," he said. His voice dropped to a hiss. "What are you doing here?" "I am shopping," I said. "I hear you give great deals to family." He grabbed my elbow and steered me away from the showroom floor, guiding me toward the service bay entrance where the noise of impact wrenches would drown us out. "You cannot just show up here. Sarah, I have clients. I went to the bank. Kyle. And the courthouse." His face went pale. The healthy tan he maintained seemed to drain away, leaving his skin looking waxy. "Sarah, listen. I know about the loan," I said, cutting him off. "I know about the deed. I know Mom used my name to secure the equity line. Did you know?" Kyle looked around nervously. He ran a hand through his hair. "It is not what it looks like. Is my name on a loan I did not sign? Mom had to do it. Sarah, you have to understand. After Dad left, after Dad checked out mentally, things got tight, really tight. The house needed repairs. The roof was leaking. She could not get the loan on her own income. She needed a cosigner. So she forged my signature?" I asked. "Why not yours? You were the golden boy. You were the one living there." "My credit was shot," he whispered. "I had some issues back then. You know that. I did not know that. I knew Kyle liked to party. I knew he had wrecked a car. I did not know his financial life was a ruin. So she used me." I said, "She used the 18-year-old she had just kicked out onto the street. She was protecting the asset," Kyle said. "Finding his footing again. It is the family home." Sarah. It is your inheritance, too. Eventually. She was trying to save it for us. For us? I laughed. A harsh, barking sound. I have not stepped foot in that house in 15 years. I was homeless. Kyle, I slept in my car for 3 weeks in Baylark before I found a room. Did you know that? While you were fixing the roof with money borrowed in my name, I was sleeping in a parking lot. Kyle winced. He looked genuinely pained. But it was the pain of discomfort, not empathy. We did not know it was that bad. He said, Mom said you were doing fine. She said you wanted space. Mom lied. I said, and you let her. I turned to leave. Sarah, wait, Kyle called after me. Please, do not set her off. Not this week. The gala is Saturday. She has worked so hard for this reputation. If you start waving legal papers around, if she did not want legal papers waved around, she should not have committed fraud. I said, I walked out of the dealership. My hands were steady now. I had one more stop before I faced the Queen herself. I drove to a small bungalow on the east side of town. The mailbox said Elkins. Mrs. Elkins had been my high school guidance counselor. She was the one person who had told me I was smart, that I had potential. She had helped me fill out college applications that I never got to submit. I knocked on the door. It took a moment, but then it opened. Mrs. Elkins was older, her hair fully gray now, but her eyes were the same sharp, observant blue. Sarah, she said, squinting through the screen. Sarah Cooper? Hello, Mrs. Elkins. She opened the door wide. My goodness, it has been a decade, or more. Come in, child. Come in. Her house smelled of cinnamon and old books. She made me tea. We sat in her living room, surrounded by ceramic cats and knitted Afghans. I heard you were back, she said. Small-town news travels fast. They say you are here for the Heritage Week. I am here for answers. I said, I told her an abridged version. I did not mention the fraud. I just said I was trying to understand why I had left the way I did. I always wondered about you, Mrs. Elkins said, stirring her tea. You were such a bright girl, so driven. I had high hopes for you. I wanted to go to college. I said, I had the grades. You had more than grades. Sarah, you had the scholarship. I froze. The teacup paused halfway to my mouth. What scholarship? Mrs. Elkins frowned. She put her cup down. The Regional Merit Scholarship. The one from the Rotary Club. It was a full ride to the State University. Tuition, room, and board. I never applied for that. I said, I missed the deadline. Mom said I missed the deadline. Mrs. Elkins looked at me, her expression shifting from confusion to sorrow. Sarah, you won it. The committee selected you based on your preliminary application and your essay. They sent the letter in May. I stared at her. The room seemed to tilt. A full ride. I could have gone to college. I could have left with dignity. I could have been a student, not a runaway. I never got a letter. I said, Mrs. Elkins sighed. She looked down at her hands. Your mother came in. Sarah. About a week before graduation. She had a meeting with the principal and me. She told us that you had decided not to attend college. She said you wanted to take a few years off to find yourself. She said you were burnt out and that pushing you into school would be a mistake. She declined the scholarship on your behalf. She declined it? I whispered. She said she was respecting your wishes. She said you were troubled, that you were talking about running away to the city. She wanted to let you go so you could learn your lesson. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and angry. She told everyone I ran away. I said, yes, Mrs. Elkins said gently. That was the story. Poor Diane, abandoned by her wild daughter. Broken-hearted but strong. That is what people believe. Sarah. That is the story this town has told for 15 years. I stood up. I could not sit there anymore. The weight of the lie was crushing me. Thank you, Mrs. Elkins. I left her house and got into my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Diane. Meet me at the Daily Grind. 2:00 p.m. Do not be late. It was 1:45. I drove to the town square. The Daily Grind was the new trendy cafe. It had exposed brick walls and Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling. It was crowded. I saw her immediately. Diane Cooper was sitting at a window table. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and gold earrings. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, a stiff helmet of blonde lacquer. She looked wealthy. She looked benevolent. I walked over. She stood up as I approached, her face arranging itself into a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Sarah!" she exclaimed, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. She pulled me into a hug. She smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. Her body was stiff against mine. It was a performance. I was a prop. "Look at you," she said, holding me at arm's length. "You look so professional." She turned to the woman sitting at the next table, a woman I vaguely recognized as a member of the church council. "This is my Sarah," Diane said, beaming. "My independent girl. She runs a big company in the city. Always was so headstrong. This one." The woman smiled politely. "Nice to meet you, Sarah. Your mother talks about you all the time. I bet she does." I said. Diane's grip on my arm tightened just a fraction. Sit," she said. "Let us catch up." I sat. Diane ordered a latte. I ordered black coffee. When the waiter left, the smile dropped from Diane's face. It was replaced by a look of appraisal. Her eyes flicked down to the large leather tote bag I had brought. She was looking for the papers. "I am glad you came," she said. "The family needs to be together this week. It looks bad if we are not." "Is that why you called?" I asked. "Because it looks bad? I called because it is time to heal, Sarah, and because there are some administrative things we need to handle." "Like the loan?" I asked. Diane did not flinch. She took a sip of her latte, leaving a perfect lipstick stain on the rim. "I assumed you got the letter. Banks are such a nuisance with their paperwork. I went to the bank this morning." Diane. Her cup clattered slightly as she set it down. "You went to the branch?" "Yes. I saw Lowell Brandt. He told me about the custodial account. He told me about the home equity line. He told me I am a co-owner of the house." Diane waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that was years ago. Sarah, we needed to restructure some things after your father. Well, you know how he gets. I put your name on the title to protect your inheritance. I was thinking of you. You forged my signature." I said. I kept my voice low. "But it was hard. I did no such thing." Diane said, "You signed those papers." "You were always signing things back then. Permission slips, job applications. You probably just forgot. You were very emotional that summer. I was not there." "Diane, the loan is dated the day after you kicked me out." Diane's eyes narrowed. The warmth vanished completely. "I did not kick you out. You left. You ran away because you did not want to follow my rules. Mrs. Elkins told me about the scholarship." I said. Diane froze. For a second, just a second, I saw fear, but she buried it instantly under a layer of indignation. "Mrs. Elkins is a senile old woman. She does not know what she is talking about. I saved you from yourself. Sarah, you were not ready for college. You would have flunked out. I did what a mother had to do. You stole my life." I said. "You stole my education. And you used my identity to fund your renovations." Diane leaned across the table. Her voice dropped to the command tone I remembered from my childhood. The tone that meant, "Stop talking, or there will be consequences." "Lower your voice," she hissed. "You are making a scene. I do not care." I said, "You should care. You have a nice little life in Baylark. Do you not? A job? A boyfriend? It would be a shame if they found out you were involved in bank fraud." I stared at her. "Are you threatening me?" "I am telling you the reality." Diane said, "Your name is on those documents. If you go to the police, you go down too. You are the co-borrower. You are the one who benefited from the equity. Do you think a jury will believe you did not know? After 15 years? Ignorance is not a defense. Sarah." She smiled then, a cold, triumphant smile. "We will talk at home," she said. "Come to dinner tonight. We will sign the papers to update the loan terms, and this will all go away. Do not be difficult." She stood up, smoothed her sweater, and dropped a $20 bill on the table. See you at 6. Do not be late. She walked out of the cafe, waving to someone near the door. I sat there for a long time, staring at the $20 bill. She had trapped me. She had built a cage out of my own name and locked me inside it 15 years ago, and I had not even known I was a prisoner. If I reported the fraud, I implicated myself. If I signed the new papers, I reaffirmed the debt and let her win. I walked back to my car. The afternoon sun was blinding. I drove back to the motel, my head pounding. I needed to call Nia Voss. I needed a lawyer. As I unlocked the door to my room, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize. Don't let her corner you. Check the storage unit on Lark Street. Unit 4B. The code is 1988. I stared at the screen. Lark Street was on the other side of town, near the old industrial park. I did not know who sent the text. But I knew one thing. 1988 was the year I was born. I grabbed my keys. I was not going to dinner. I was going to Lark Street. The industrial park on Lark Street was the part of Ridgehaven that the heritage banners ignored. It was a grid of corrugated metal buildings, auto body shops, and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. The sun, which had felt oppressive in the town square, seemed to bleach the color out of everything here, turning the asphalt into a shimmering gray wasteland. I pulled my rental car up to the gate of Securite Self-Storage. The keypad on the post was rusted. I punched in the code from the text message, 1988. The gate groaned and rolled back. I drove through, my tires crunching on gravel. Unit 4B was located in the second row, an orange door with peeling paint. I parked and killed the engine. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the highway. There was a padlock on the door. I did not have a key. I walked to the main office, a small trailer at the front of the lot. The air inside smelled of stale tobacco and floor wax. A man with a gray ponytail was sitting behind the counter, watching a game show on a portable television. "Help you?" he asked, not looking away from the screen. "I am trying to get into Unit 4B. I said, "I lost my key." He sighed and paused the TV. He swiveled his chair around to face me. His name tag read, "Earl. Name on the unit?" "Diane Cooper." I said, "But I am her daughter. Sarah. She sent me to pick up some boxes." Earl squinted at me. He typed something into a computer that looked like it belonged in a museum. ID? I handed him my driver's license. He looked at it, then back at the screen. "You are not listed as an authorized user." He said, "I know." I said, leaning against the counter, "But look at the payment history. It is on autopay, right?" Earl raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. And look at the notes. Are there any notes about returned mail?" He hesitated. He looked at the screen again. His expression shifted. "Yeah, a lot of it. We tried to send rate increase notices to the address on file, but they kept coming back marked, addressee unknown. That is because the address on file is probably mine." I lied. "Or an old one. Look, my mother is Diane Cooper. She is sponsoring the gala downtown this week. You can call her if you want, but she is in a meeting with the mayor and she hates being interrupted. I just need to get the Christmas decorations out of the unit." I held my breath. It was a gamble. In a town like Ridgehaven, dropping the name of a VIP could either open doors or get them slammed in your face. Earl looked at my license again. He looked at the name, Cooper. "I remember her," he said, his voice lowering. "She used to come here a lot years ago, always in a hurry, driving that big station wagon." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a pair of bolt cutters. "I can cut the lock," he said, "but you have to buy a new one from me." $10. Done. He walked with me to the unit. The metal of the bolt cutters snapped the padlock with a sharp crack that sounded like a gunshot. Earl slid the latch open and rolled up the door. "I will leave you to it," he said. The door rattled upward, revealing a dark, dusty space. I stepped inside. The unit was not full of furniture. It was not full of Christmas decorations. It was filled with file boxes, dozens of them. They were stacked against the walls, creating a narrow corridor down the center. I walked to the nearest stack. The writing on the side of the box was in thick black marker. "Sarah. Keep." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I opened the box. It was filled with envelopes. I picked one up. It was addressed to Sarah Cooper, care of 42 Elm Street. The return address was University of Virginia, Office of Admissions. It was unopened. I picked up another, Department of Education, unopened. Another, Ridgehaven High School Alumni Association. I sat down on the dusty concrete floor. I dumped the box out. There were hundreds of letters from colleges, letters from friends I thought had ghosted me, letters from my father's side of the family. I opened the letter from the university. It was dated May of my senior year. Dear Ms. Cooper, we are pleased to inform you. I had been accepted, and I had never known. I reached for another box. This one was labeled Sarah. Legal. Inside, I found a manila envelope. The seal was broken. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a power of attorney form, specifically for banking transactions. It was dated June 20th, 15 years ago, 1 week after I left. It appointed Diane Cooper as the authorized signer for all accounts held in the name of Sarah E. Cooper. At the bottom of the page, there was a signature, Sarah E. Cooper. It was the same forgery I had seen at the bank. The loops were perfect. Too perfect. I dug deeper into the box. I found a worn spiral notebook. The cover was covered in stickers, bands I had listened to when I was 17, political slogans I had thought were edgy. It was my journal. I had looked for this journal everywhere before I left. I thought I had lost it. I opened it. The handwriting was mine, frantic and messy. I read an entry from March of that year. Mom says I am dreaming if I think I can get into UVA. She says we cannot afford it and my grades are slipping, but I have a 3.8. Why does she keep saying I am failing? I turned the page. The next 10 pages were missing. They had been torn out, leaving jagged strips of paper near the spiral binding. I flipped forward. Another chunk of pages was missing. It was curated. Someone, Diane, had gone through my private thoughts and removed the evidence. She had removed the days where I wrote about the arguments. She had removed the days where I wrote about the scholarship meeting I thought I had imagined. She had edited my history to fit her narrative. I sat there in the silence, surrounded by the paper ghosts of the life I was supposed to have. The flashbacks hit me then, not as memories, but as realizations. I remembered the kitchen table. Senior year, Diane shaking her head as I talked about an internship at the local newspaper. Sarah, honey, you are not cut out for that kind of pressure. You are a worker. You are good with your hands. You should look at the diner. They are hiring. I remembered her voice when I brought home a report card with an A-. See, you are slipping. You cannot handle the workload. It had not been concern. It had been conditioning. She had systematically lowered my ceiling until the only option left was the floor. And when I finally hit the floor, when she kicked me out, she had stolen the identity I left behind to build her own ceiling higher. I put the notebook in my bag. I took the power of attorney form. I took the acceptance letter. I left the storage unit and locked it with the new padlock I had bought from Earl. I drove straight to the address I had found online for Nia Voss, attorney at law. Nia's office was in a converted house near the courthouse. It was messy, stacked with files, and smelled of coffee. Nia herself was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She did not look like the lawyers on TV. She looked tired. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. She looked at the documents I had brought. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and took off her glasses. This is a mess. Sarah, I know. I said, is it fraud? Nia rubbed her temples. Technically? Yes. Using a power of attorney that was forged, or obtaining one under false pretenses, to secure a loan is fraud. Intercepting mail is a federal offense. Accessing a custodial account after the minor turns 18 without their consent is theft. So we can sue her. I said, we can go to the police. Nia held up a hand. Slow down. In the eyes of the law, family fraud is the murkiest water there is. Why? I asked. The evidence is right here. Because of the timeline. Nia said, this happened 15 years ago. The statute of limitations on some of this has run out. The fraud on the home equity line is newer. Yes, but here's the problem. You are the co-borrower. So? I did not sign it. Can you prove you did not benefit from it? Nia asked. Did you ever receive money from your mother? Did she ever send you cash? Pay a bill for you? No, never. If we go to the police, the bank will immediately freeze the assets. They might foreclose on the house. Your mother will claim you gave her verbal permission. She will claim you were a troubled teen and she was managing your affairs. She will bring in witnesses, neighbors, friends, who will testify that you were unstable and she was a saint. She paused. And if the bank decides to pursue charges, they might name you as a defendant until you can prove your innocence. You could end up with a fraud record. Sarah, even if you win, your credit will be destroyed for years. I felt the anger burn hot in my chest. So I just let her get away with it, I asked. I let her keep the house she renovated with my name? No, Nia said. We do not let her get away with it, but we do not go in guns blazing unless we have the ammunition to kill the target. We need leverage. We need to prove intent. We need to know where the money went. She turned her computer monitor toward me. I did a little digging before you came in. She said, You mentioned your mother is sponsoring the Heritage Gala. Yes. Do you know who runs the nonprofit that hosts the gala? No. It is a group called the Ridgehaven Future Fund. The board members are interesting. The president is the owner of the construction company that renovated the downtown square. The treasurer is the CFO of Ridgehaven Motors, Kyle's dealership. I said, Exactly. And look at the projects they are funding. They are pushing for a new development on the north side of town, a mixed-use luxury complex. Nia clicked a map on the screen. The proposed site includes the land adjacent to your mother's property. In fact, her property is the anchor lot. If that development goes through, the value of her land triples. I stared at the map. She is not just protecting the house. I realized. She is holding onto a lottery ticket, and she needs your name on the title to control it. Nia said, If you trigger an investigation, the title gets clouded. The developers will walk away. The deal collapses. That is the leverage. I said, That is the leverage. Nia agreed. But be careful. Sarah, when you threaten a narcissist's money, they do not just get angry. They get dangerous. I left Nia's office with a retainer agreement and a headache. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the town. I had to go to the house. Diane had told me to come for dinner. I knew it was a trap. I knew she would have the new loan documents ready for me to sign, but I also knew that she would be off balance. She thought I was just a prodigal daughter looking for scraps. She did not know I had seen the storage unit. I drove to 42 Elm Street. The house was glowing. Every window was lit. The porch light was on. It looked like a Thomas Kincaid painting, a beacon of domestic warmth. I parked in the driveway behind Diane's SUV. I walked up the new paver path. I did not knock. I still had my key, a duplicate I had made when I was 16 and hidden in my shoe. It still worked. I walked in. The inside of the house smelled of pot roast and expensive candles. The entryway was unrecognizable. The old linoleum was gone, replaced by hardwood. The walls were painted a soft, creamy beige. Sarah? Diane appeared from the kitchen. She was wearing an apron over her cashmere sweater. She was holding a wine glass. You are late, she said, her voice tight. I told you 6. It is 7. I walked past her into the living room. Kyle was there, sitting on the new leather sofa, staring at his phone. He looked up, his eyes widening when he saw my face. Where is Dad? I asked. He is working late, Diane said. He will be here shortly. Now, come into the kitchen. I have the papers laid out. We can get this signed before we eat. I did not move. I went to the storage unit. Diane. The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to roar. Diane froze. She took a slow sip of wine. I do not know what you are talking about. Unit 4B. I said, Lark Street. The code is 1988. I found the letters. The ones from UVA. The ones from the Department of Education. Kyle stood up. Mom, he said. What is she talking about? Shut up. Kyle, Diane snapped. She did not look at him. She stared at me, her eyes hard and glittering. You had no right to go there, she said. That is my private property. You stole my mail. I said, you stole my acceptance letter. You told me I was too stupid for college while you were hiding the proof that I got in. Why? I tossed the manila envelope with the power of attorney form onto the coffee table. It slid across the glass surface and hit the wine bottle. And you forged this. You made yourself my authorized signer a week after you threw me out. You opened credit lines in my name while I was sleeping in a car. Diane set her wine glass down. The mask was gone now. The healing mother act evaporated, replaced by the cold. Sharp steel I remembered from my childhood. You ungrateful little brat, she said. She took a step toward me. You think you were some victim? You think you were a martyr? You were a burden. Sarah, you were always a burden. You were moody, difficult, and expensive. So you decided to cash me out? I asked. I did what I had to do to save this family, she shouted. Her voice cracked, losing its polished edge. We were drowning. Diane gestured around the room. After your father's business went under, we had nothing. Kyle was in trouble, real trouble. Kyle flinched. He looked down at his shoes. What kind of trouble? I asked, looking at my brother. He owed money, Diane said, answering for him, to people you do not borrow money from. He needed help. He needed a lawyer. He needed a clean slate. And we had no credit. My credit was ruined. Your father's was worse. So you used mine. I said, You were 18, Diane screamed. You had a clean file. It was sitting there. Useless. You were leaving anyway. You were going to go off and waste your life working in some diner. Why should that credit go to waste when it could save your brother? I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. You sacrificed me, I whispered. You looked at your 2 children, and you decided he was the investment and I was the currency. I chose the child who could survive, Diane hissed. She was close to me now, her face inches from mine. Kyle is soft. He would have broken. You are like me. You are hard. I knew you would figure it out. And look at you. You are fine. You are successful. You survived. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest. So do not come back here acting like I destroyed you. I made you. I pushed you out so you would toughen up. And I used what you left behind to keep a roof over this family's head. You owe me. Sarah, you owe me for raising you. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I saw no love. I saw only calculation. I do not owe you anything, I said, and I am not signing your papers. Diane laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. You already signed them. Sarah, years ago, you signed them, and you forgot. That is what we will tell the judge. That is what we will tell the bank. Who are they going to believe? The pillar of the community, or the daughter who ran away and came back looking for a payout? I picked up my bag. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. I am not looking for a payout. Diane, I am looking for a wrecking ball. I turned and walked out the front door. I heard Diane screaming my name, but I did not stop. I walked down the paver driveway, the expensive stones clicking under my heels. Sarah, wait! It was Kyle. He was running after me. I stopped at my car and spun around. What? I snapped. Are you going to tell me she had reasons again? Are you going to tell me you were in trouble? Kyle stopped a few feet away. He looked terrified. He looked like a little boy wearing a man's suit. I am sorry, he whispered. I am so sorry. Sarah, I wanted to tell you. I wanted to call you, but you didn't. I said, You let me think I was worthless so you could drive a nice truck. It wasn't just the debt. Sarah, he said, his voice trembling. What? The trouble I was in. It wasn't just gambling or whatever she told you. It was legal. He looked back at the house. Diane was standing in the doorway, a silhouette against the light. She bought my way out of it, Kyle said. With your money. With the education fund. What education fund? I asked. The one from Aunt Clara, he said. The one Dad told her to keep for you. My head snapped up. Aunt Clara had died when I was 10. I never knew she left money. There was a trust? I asked. Kyle nodded. Mom drained it. She forged your signature to dissolve the trust the day you turned 18. She used it to pay off the people involved in my accident. He took a step closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. Dad didn't know. Sarah. He thought the money was still there. He thinks you took it when you left. That's why he never called you. She told him you took the cash and ran. I stared at him. The betrayal was not a single layer. It was geological. It went down deep, through strata of lies I hadn't even touched yet. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Kyle looked at his mother in the doorway, then back at me. His eyes were wet. Because she's hiding the real reason she needs you to sign those new papers. It's not just about the development project. What is it? She leveraged the house again. Kyle whispered. Last month, she took out a hard money loan, high interest. If she doesn't get the refinance approved by Friday, she defaults. And if she defaults, the auditors come in. He swallowed hard. And if the auditors come in, they're going to find out that the Sarah Cooper who signed the documents 5 years ago was actually in Baylark. She needs your signature to ratify the fraud. Sarah, if you don't sign, she goes to prison. I looked at the house. It wasn't a fortress. It was a house of cards. Let her fall, I said. I got into my car and slammed the door. I drove away, leaving my brother standing in the driveway of the home that my stolen future had paid for. I drove until I couldn't see the lights of Ridgehaven anymore. I pulled over onto the shoulder of the dark highway. I gripped the steering wheel and screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw, a sound that had been trapped inside me for 15 years. Then I wiped my face, put the car in gear, and turned back toward town. I wasn't running away this time. I was going to find my father, and then I was going to burn the house of cards down. I met my father at a diner on the edge of town called the Silver Spoon. It was a place that smelled of bacon grease and stale coffee, the kind of establishment that had not changed its vinyl upholstery since the 1970s. Frank Cooper was sitting in a booth near the back. When I walked in, I almost did not recognize him. The man in my memory was tall, broad-shouldered, a silent giant who spent his weekends working on engines in the garage. The man in the booth was shrunken. His shoulders were rounded forward, and his hair, once a thick salt and pepper, was entirely white and thinning at the crown. He wore a plaid flannel shirt that looked a size too big for his neck. I slid into the booth opposite him. He looked up, and his eyes, the same gray-blue as mine, widened slightly. He did not smile. He looked terrified. Sarah, he said. His voice was gravelly, unused. Hello, Dad? He reached for his coffee cup, his hand trembling just enough to make the liquid ripple. You look good, he said. You look grown. I am 33. Dad, I have been grown for a long time. He nodded, looking down at the Formica table. He seemed unable to hold my gaze. This was Frank Cooper's primary survival mechanism: avoidance. He had spent my entire childhood avoiding conflict, avoiding Diane's temper, avoiding the reality of what was happening under his own roof. I heard you saw your mother. He said, I saw her. I said, she told me to come to dinner tonight. He nodded again. You should come. She went to a lot of trouble. She invited the Millers and the Hendersons. Why? I asked. Why invite neighbors to a family reunion? Frank shrugged. A heavy, defeated movement. She wants things to be nice. Sarah. She wants to show everyone that we are whole. We are not whole, Dad. I said, we are a crime scene. Frank flinched. He put his cup down. Sarah, please, do not start. I am not starting anything. I said, I am finishing it. Kyle told me about the trust. Dad, Aunt Clara's money. Frank went very still. He looked at the salt shaker. He looked at the napkin dispenser. He looked everywhere but at me. Kyle should not have said anything. He muttered, Did you know? I asked. Frank sighed. It was a long, rattling exhalation that seemed to deflate him further. I knew there was money, he said. Clara left it for you. $25,000. It was supposed to be for college. $25,000. In spoken words, it sounded like a fortune. To an 18-year-old girl sleeping in a Honda Civic, it would have been life-saving. Where did it go? Dad? Your mother said you took it, Frank said quietly. I stared at him. The noise of the diner, the clatter of silverware, the sizzling of the grill, faded into a dull buzz. She said I took it? She said you demanded it before you left. Frank said, she said you told her you were cashing out, that you were taking your inheritance and leaving us behind because you hated us. She said that is why you left in such a hurry, because you had the check and you did not want to look back. I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. It was the specific, paralyzing cold of realizing that the person who was supposed to protect you had been sold a lie so convenient he never bothered to check the receipt. I left with $200. Dad, I said, I left with a trash bag of clothes. I did not have a bank account. How could I have cashed a trust check? Frank finally looked at me. His eyes were watery, red-rimmed with age and regret. I did not know. Sarah, She showed me the ledger. It said closed. She said you were angry. You were always so quiet that year. I thought maybe you just wanted to get away from us. I did want to get away, I said, but I did not take the money. Diane took it. She forged my signature. Kyle told me she used it to pay off his legal trouble. Frank closed his eyes. He rubbed a hand over his face, the skin papery and loose. Kyle got into a bad spot. Frank whispered, a hit and run. It was messy. The other driver. They wanted to press charges. We settled it. It cost everything we had, and then some. And you thought the money came from where? I asked. From thin air? Diane handles the finances, Frank said. She always has. I just work. Sarah, I just try to keep the peace. And that is your excuse? I asked, my voice rising. I lowered it again as a waitress walked by. You let her kick me out. You let her tell everyone I was a thief and a runaway. Did you ever try to call me? Did you ever once try to find me? I called. Frank said, his voice cracked. I called the number we had for you. For 6 months. Every Sunday. I never got a call. I said, she changed the number. Frank said, or she blocked it. I do not know how phones work. Sarah, I just know I dialed, and it never rang. And then I stopped, because I thought if you wanted to talk to me, you would have called. I thought you were living it up somewhere with Clara's money, happy to be rid of us. He looked at me, and I saw the ruin of a man who had surrendered his agency decades ago. He was not evil. He was just weak, and in my family. Weakness was the soil in which Diane's evil grew. I did not hate him. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I just felt a profound, aching pity. I am not happy. Dad, I said, and I am not rich. I work in logistics. I rent an apartment. I have been clawing my way up from zero for 15 years because my mother stole the ladder. Frank reached across the table. His hand hovered over mine, uncertain. He did not touch me. I am sorry. Sarah, I am so sorry. Sorry does not fix the fraud. Dad, I said, sorry does not put my name back on the deed she stole. Frank pulled his hand back. She is in deep. Sarah, he said softly, the house. She has leveraged it to the hilt. This development deal? It is the only way out. If she pulls it off, she pays everyone back. She says she will make it right with you. She wants to give you a share. She does not want to give me a share, I said. She wants to give me a gag order. I stood up. I could not look at him anymore. It hurt too much to see the father I had missed reduced to this trembling apologist. I am coming to dinner. I said, but tell her I am not signing anything. Frank looked up at me, fear etching deep lines around his mouth. Just be careful. Sarah, he whispered. When she gets cornered, she bites. I spent the afternoon in Nia Voss's office. The air conditioning was humming, a steady mechanical sound that grounded me while my world spun. Nia had the records, or at least, the preliminary ones. She laid a spreadsheet out on her desk. Here is the timeline, she said, using a pen to point at the dates. June 4th, 15 years ago. That is the date of the police report for Kyle's accident. Property damage. Leaving the scene. It was ugly. She slid her finger down the page. June 14th, 10 days later. That is the date the trust account was liquidated. $25,400.12. She moved her finger again. June 15th. A cashier's check for $25,000 is issued to the victim of the accident. Settlement agreement signed. Charges dropped. It is a straight line. I said, it is a smoking gun. Nia corrected. The timing is irrefutable. She used your money to buy Kyle's freedom, and she did it exactly 1 week after she removed you from the house, likely to make sure you were not around to see the mail or hear the conversations. Can we prove she signed it? I asked. We can hire a handwriting expert, Nia said. But honestly, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. If we file this, a judge will order a forensic audit. They will subpoena the bank's internal records. They will find the forgery. So we have her. I said, we have her on the old fraud. Nia said, but remember the statute of limitations. The trust theft might be too old to prosecute criminally. However, it establishes a pattern. It proves she has a history of using your identity. That strengthens our case against the current mortgage fraud and the deed issues. She looked at me. Her expression serious. You are going to dinner tonight? Yes. Do not sign anything. Nia said, do not agree to anything verbally, and if you can, get her to talk. If she admits to any of this, even partially, it helps. I nodded. I felt a strange mix of dread and clarity. I left Nia's office and went back to the motel to change. I put on a black dress. It was simple, severe, armor. I looked in the mirror. I saw a woman who was tired. I saw a woman who was grieving. I wasn't just angry about the money. I was angry that I had spent 15 years thinking I was unlovable, thinking I was the problem, when all along I was just a resource to be harvested. But beneath the anger, there was a shameful, quiet pulse. I still wanted my mother to look at me and be sorry. I still wanted her to say, I love you, and mean it. I hated myself for it. But the child inside me was still waiting at the door with a packed bag, hoping to be asked to stay. I drove to the house at 6:30. The driveway was full. There were cars I did not recognize. A Lexus, a BMW, the neighbors. I walked up the path. The front door was open. I could hear laughter and the clinking of glass. I stepped inside. The living room was transformed. It looked like a set from a holiday movie. There were fresh flowers on every surface. A fire was crackling in the gas fireplace. Even though it was only 60 degrees outside, Diane was in the center of the room, holding court. She wore a silk dress in emerald green. She looked radiant. She looked like the matriarch of a dynasty. She saw me and her face lit up. It was a perfect, practiced expression of delight. Sarah, you made it. She crossed the room and embraced me. The room went quiet. All eyes were on us. Everyone, this is my daughter. Sarah, Diane announced, keeping her arm draped possessively around my shoulders. She drove all the way from Baylark. She has such a busy career, but she made time for family. A chorus of hellos and welcome homes rippled through the room. I recognized Mrs. Miller from next door. I recognized Mr. Henderson from the church choir. They smiled at me with benevolent curiosity. We are so glad you are back. Mrs. Miller said, your mother has missed you terribly. She talks about you constantly. I looked at Diane. She was beaming, but her fingers were digging into my shoulder blade. I missed you too. I lied. The dinner was a masterclass in manipulation. We sat at the long dining table, which had been set with the good china, the china I was never allowed to touch as a child. Diane sat at the head, Frank at the foot. I was placed on Diane's right, the seat of honor. Kyle and his wife, Tessa, were across from me. Tessa looked like she was about to be sick. She was a small, nervous woman with dark hair who kept shredding her napkin in her lap. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. Diane directed the conversation like a conductor. She asked me questions that were designed to make me look successful but distant. Tell them about your logistics work. Sarah, It sounds so complex. I always say Sarah got her father's brains. But my drive, I answered in short sentences. I ate the roast beef, which tasted like ash, midway through the meal. Diane tapped her spoon against her wine glass. The crystal rang out, silencing the table. I want to make a toast, she said. Standing up, she looked around the table, her eyes resting softly on everyone before landing on me. To family, she began. We have had our hard times. Every family does. There were years where things were broken. When Sarah left us, I thought my heart would never heal. She paused for effect. Mrs. Miller dabbed at her eye. But, Diane continued, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. Faith brought us back. Sarah has come home to help us build the future. She has come home to forgive and to be forgiven. My fork clattered onto my plate. To be forgiven? The narrative was being rewritten in real time. In Diane's version, I was the prodigal son. I was the one who had sinned. I was the one who needed redemption, and she was the saint who had kept the door open to rebuilding. Diane finished, raising her glass. To rebuilding, the guests echoed. I did not raise my glass. I stared at the tablecloth. I could feel the pressure of the room, the collective weight of their expectation. They wanted the happy ending. They wanted the hug. I stood up. Excuse me. I said, I need some water. I walked into the kitchen before anyone could stop me. The kitchen was empty, filled with the debris of the meal, dirty pans, serving platters. It was the backstage of the performance. I leaned against the counter and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking. The door swung open. It was Diane. She closed the door behind her. The smile was gone. What are you doing? She hissed. You are embarrassing me. I am embarrassing you? I asked. Turning to face her, I slid my hand into my pocket and pressed the record button on my phone. You just told a room full of people that I need to be forgiven. For what? Diane? For surviving? Stop being dramatic. Sarah, Diane said, moving to the sink to stack plates. I am setting the stage. These people are important. They are investors. They are community leaders. They need to see a united front. You mean they need to see that the cosigner is on board? I said. Diane turned, her eyes flashing. Yes, Sarah. I need them to see that. Because if they don't, the financing falls through. And if the financing falls through, we lose everything. Is that what you want? Do you want to see your father on the street? I want the truth. I said, I want you to admit what you did. You stole Aunt Clara's money. You stole my credit. You stole my life. Diane slammed a plate onto the counter. It cracked. I saved this family, she screamed. Her voice was raw, stripping away the polish. You were leaving. You were going to go off and become nothing. Why should that money have sat there while your brother went to jail? Why should this house have rotted while you played victim in some apartment? So it is my fault? I asked, keeping my voice steady. If you hadn't left, none of this would have been necessary, Diane yelled. If you had stayed, if you had done what you were told, if you had helped us instead of running away, I wouldn't have had to forge anything. You forced my hand. Sarah, you made me do it. There it was, the confession. You are saying you forged my signature because I left? I asked, clarifying for the recording. I am saying I did what I had to do to survive you, Diane spat. And now you are going to sign those papers and fix it. You are going to go back out there, smile, and play the good daughter, or so help me God. Sarah, I will ruin you. I will tell the bank you were complicit. I will tell them you took a cut of the cash. I will drag you down with me. She stared at me, her chest heaving. Fix your face, she said, and come back out. She turned and marched back into the dining room, the smile reattaching itself to her face before she crossed the threshold. I stood there for a moment, listening to the recording in my head. If you hadn't left, none of this would have been necessary. I had it. I turned to leave, but the back door opened. It was Tessa. She looked terrified. She had come in from the patio, probably smoking a cigarette to escape the dinner. Sarah, she whispered. I looked at her, I heard her, Tessa said. I heard her yelling. She walked over to me. Her hands were shaking. You need to know something. Sarah? It is not just the money. What is it? Tessa? Kyle? He didn't just have an accident, she said, her voice barely audible. The person he hit. It was a kid, a teenager. The family wanted blood. Diane didn't just pay for damages. She paid for silence. I felt the blood drain from my face. She paid them off? She paid the family to sign a non-disclosure agreement and drop the charges. Tessa said, that is where the trust money went. All of it. Does Kyle know? He knows, Tessa said, tears welling in her eyes. He hates himself for it. That is why he does whatever she says. She holds it over him. She tells him that if he ever defies her, she will leak the truth and ruin him. She owns him. Sarah, just like she thinks she owns you. I looked at my sister-in-law. She was a hostage. They were all hostages. Get out of here. Tessa, I said, take the kids and go to your mom's. Tonight. But just go, I said, because this house is going to burn down. I walked out the back door. I didn't say goodbye to Frank. I didn't say goodbye to the neighbors. I got in my car and drove. I felt sick. The corruption wasn't just financial, it was moral rot. Diane had used my college fund to pay hush money for a hit and run involving a child. She had turned my future into a bribe. I drove back to the motel. The neon sign was buzzing. I parked in front of my room. There was a flyer tucked under my windshield wiper. I got out and pulled it free. It was a public notice, printed on bright orange paper. Notice of public hearing regarding the Ridgehaven North Development Project. It listed the agenda items: rezoning, environmental impact, and then, at the bottom, a list of principal stakeholders and applicants. Diane Cooper, Ridgehaven Future Fund. Sarah E. Cooper. My name was there. In black and white. I was not just a victim of fraud. I was a listed applicant on a multi-million-dollar development project. If this project turned out to be a scam, if there was environmental damage, or investor fraud, or bribery, I was liable. My name was on the application. I realized then that I couldn't just sue her and walk away. I couldn't just get my name off the deed and leave. I was already in the trap. The only way out was to destroy the trap itself. I looked at the date on the flyer. The hearing was tomorrow night. I took out my phone and called Nia. Nia, I said when she answered. Sarah, it is late. Are you okay? I have a recording. I said. She admitted she forged the papers because I left, and I know about the hit and run. There was a silence on the line. Okay, Nia said. That changes things. And Nia? Yes? I am looking at a flyer for a town meeting tomorrow. My name is on it. I know. Nia said. I saw it online. That is what I was going to call you about in the morning. I am going to that meeting. I said, Sarah, Nia warned, if you go there, you have to be careful. If you speak, it is on the record. I know. I said, I want it on the record. I hung up. I stood in the parking lot of the budget motel, holding the orange flyer. The wind picked up, rustling the paper. Diane thought she had trapped me by putting my name on everything. She thought it would force me to protect the lie to protect myself. She was wrong. She had just given me the standing to burn it all down from the inside. The Ridgehaven Town Hall was a building designed to intimidate. It was all heavy stone and echoing marble floors. A place where footsteps sounded like gavel strikes. The air inside smelled of floor wax and old bureaucracy. I walked in with Nia Voss beside me. Nia wore a charcoal suit that looked like armor. I wore the same black dress from the disastrous dinner. Feeling like I was attending a funeral for a life I never got to live. The meeting room was packed. Rows of folding chairs were filled with locals, retired teachers, shop owners, people who had known my family for decades. At the front of the room, on a raised stage, stood a podium and a large projection screen. Diane Cooper stood at the podium. She looked impeccable. She wore a navy blazer and pearls, projecting an image of conservative, trustworthy stewardship. Kyle sat behind her at a long table, looking like a man facing a firing squad. He was pale, his eyes darting around the room, landing everywhere except on me. I took a seat in the back row. Nia sat next to me, opening a notebook. "We are here to talk about the future," Diane said into the microphone. Her voice was warm, modulated perfectly for the acoustics of the hall. "The Ridgehaven North project is not just a development, it is a promise that our town will grow, that our property values will rise, and that we will leave something substantial for our children." She clicked a remote, and a slide appeared on the screen. It showed a rendering of a sleek, mixed-use complex. Apartments, retail spaces, a park. "It is ambitious," Diane continued, "but we have secured the necessary backing. We have partnered with the Ridgehaven Future Fund, and we have dedicated local stakeholders who are personally invested in this vision." She clicked to the next slide. My stomach dropped. It was a list of principal applicants: Diane Cooper, Kyle Cooper, Sarah E. Cooper. There it was, my name, projected 5 feet high for the entire town to see. I grabbed Nia's arm. She put my name on the slide. I whispered. Nia did not look surprised. She was writing furiously in her notebook. "Listen to her language," Nia murmured. "Listen to how she frames the risk." I focused on Diane's words. "This project is a community effort," Diane was saying. "As stakeholders, we are taking on the initial burden of the zoning variance. We are personally guaranteeing the environmental compliance bonds because we believe in this land. I thought, we are guaranteeing." Nia leaned close to my ear. "Do you hear that?" Nia whispered. "She is emphasizing the personal guarantee. Environmental compliance bonds are incredibly high risk. If the EPA finds a single issue with that land, groundwater contamination, soil instability, the guarantors are liable for the cleanup costs. That could be millions of dollars. She wants me to share the profit," I whispered back, trying to be optimistic. "No, Sarah," Nia said, her voice grim. "She has leveraged her own assets to the hilt. If this goes wrong, she has nothing left to take. She needs a fresh asset to attach the liability to. That is you. She put your name on there so that if the project fails, the creditors come for your salary, your retirement, your future. She is not sharing the wealth. She is diversifying her risk." I stared at the woman on the stage. My mother. She was smiling at the crowd, talking about family legacy, while actively plotting to use me as a human shield against financial ruin. The meeting dragged on for an hour. When it ended, the room dissolved into chatter. Diane was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. I stood up. "I need to talk to Kyle," I said. Nia nodded. "I will intercept Diane. Go." I found Kyle near the side exit. He was trying to slip away, his head down, clutching a briefcase like a life preserver. "Kyle," I said. He froze. He turned slowly. He looked sick. His skin was clammy, and there were dark circles under his eyes that the stage lights had hidden. "Sarah," he said, his voice a harsh whisper, "you shouldn't be here. My name is on the screen." "Kyle, of course I'm here." I stepped closer, blocking his path to the door. We were in a narrow hallway lined with portraits of past mayors. "Tessa told me," I said. Kyle flinched as if I had slapped him. "She told me about the accident." I said, "She told me about the settlement. She told me where the trust money went." Kyle closed his eyes. He leaned back against the wall, sliding down a few inches until he looked like a child trying to hide. "I wanted to tell you," he said. "When?" I asked. "When were you going to tell me?" "When the bank came to seize my apartment. When I got arrested for environmental fraud on a project I never signed up for. It wasn't supposed to be like this," Kyle said. He opened his eyes, and they were wet with tears. "You have to understand. Sarah, I was 18. I was a kid. I hit that car. I panicked. I thought my life was over." "So you took mine?" I asked. "Mom took it," Kyle hissed. He looked around wildly to make sure no one was listening. I didn't know about the trust fund, not at first. I just knew she fixed it. She told me she handled it. She told me she found a way to pay them off so I wouldn't go to jail. "And when did you find out it was my money?" "A year later," Kyle said. "I saw the bank statements. I saw the empty account. And you said nothing. I tried." Kyle said. I tried to pay it back. I got a job. I started putting money aside. But then life happened. I got married. We had the kids. And Mom. She kept saying it was fine. She said you were gone, that you didn't need it, that we would make it up to you eventually. He looked at me, pleading. The lie became the foundation. Sarah, don't you see? Everything I have, my job, my house, my marriage, it is all built on the fact that I didn't go to prison when I was 18. If I told the truth, it all collapses. I couldn't blow up my life. So you let her blow up mine. I said, you let her keep using my name. You let her add me to this development project. I told her not to, Kyle said. I told her it was too risky. But she said it was the only way. She said she needed a co-signer with clean credit to get the bonds approved. She said if we pull this off, we make millions. She said we could pay you back 10 times over. She thinks she is helping you. Sarah, in her sick, twisted way, she thinks she is making you a partner. She is making me a fall guy. I said, and you are letting her. Kyle buried his face in his hands. I am sorry. He sobbed. I am so sorry. I looked at him. I felt a wave of exhaustion. He was pathetic. He was a grown man who had never grown up, preserved in amber by our mother's money and manipulation. I turned to leave, and the side door swung open. A man walked in. He was wearing a denim jacket and work boots. He looked out of place in the hall of suits. It was Mark. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Mark? He looked tired. He had clearly driven straight through from Baylark. He saw me and his shoulders dropped, the tension leaving his body. Sarah, he said. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me. I buried my face in his chest. I smelled engine grease and coffee and home. I hadn't realized how much I was shaking until he held me. You sounded scared on the phone, he said into my hair. I didn't want you doing this alone. I pulled back and looked at him. You shouldn't be here. I said, it is a mess, Mark. I don't care. He said, I am here. Well, look who it is. The voice came from down the hall. Diane was walking toward us, her heels clicking on the tile. Naya was trailing behind her, looking annoyed. Diane's face was arranged in a mask of delighted surprise. She didn't look at Kyle, who was wiping his eyes in the corner. She looked straight at Mark. You must be the fiancé, she said, extending a hand. I am Diane, Sarah's mother. Mark looked at her hand, then at her face. He didn't shake it. Mark, he said simply. Diane didn't miss a beat. She retracted her hand and clasped it to her chest. It is so wonderful to meet you. Mark, Sarah tells us so little. We were hoping you would come to the dinner last night, but Sarah said you were busy. She didn't tell me about a dinner. Mark said. Diane's eyes widened. She shot a pitying look at me. Oh, I see. Well, Sarah has been under a lot of stress. Coming home can be emotional. Sometimes she gets confused about the details. I am not confused. Diane, I said. My voice was sharp, and Mark is not here to be charmed. Diane laughed. A light, tinkling sound. Charmed? Don't be silly. Sarah, I am just welcoming him to the family. Come on. We were just going to head back to the house for coffee. You must come. Mark, Frank is dying to meet you. She reached out and touched Mark's arm. A proprietary gesture. We have so much to talk about. She said to him, I want to hear all about your repair shop plans. Sarah says you are quite the entrepreneur. We love ambition in this family. She was doing it right in front of me. She was trying to isolate me. She was trying to pull him into her orbit, to make me look like the unstable, hysterical daughter while she played the supportive, wealthy matriarch. Mark looked at her hand on his arm. He stepped back. Moving closer to me. We are not coming for coffee, Mark said. Sarah says she has business to finish with you. Diane's smile faltered. Business? We are coming to the house, I said, but not for coffee. We are coming to finish this, tonight. I looked at Nia. Bring the file, I said. The drive to the house was silent. Mark drove my rental car. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the folder Nia had given me. You okay? Mark asked as we turned onto Elm Street. No, I said. We pulled into the driveway. The house was dark except for the porch light. The party was over. The neighbors were gone. We walked in. Diane was already there, pouring herself a drink at the wet bar in the living room. Frank was sitting in his recliner, staring at the television, though it wasn't on. Kyle was nowhere to be seen. He had likely gone home to hide. Diane turned as we entered. She took a long sip of her drink. So, she said, the firing squad arrives. She gestured to the sofas with her glass. Sit down. If you are going to be dramatic, at least be comfortable. I did not sit. Mark stood next to me, his arms crossed. Nia placed her briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open. We are not here to be dramatic. Diane, Nia said, we are here to review the facts. She pulled out a stack of documents, the handwriting analysis, the bank records, the timeline of the trust fund withdrawal and the accident settlement. Diane didn't look at the papers. She looked at me. You brought a lawyer into my house? She asked. Her voice was quiet, dangerous. You brought my name into your fraud. I said, I picked up the timeline Nia had created. I know about the trust. Diane, I know you forged my signature to liquidate Aunt Clara's money. I know you used it to pay off the family of the boy Kyle hit. Frank made a sound, a low, pained groan. He covered his face with his hands. Diane did not flinch. She swirled the ice in her glass. You were 18, she said. You were legally an adult. I was not here, I shouted. I slammed the paper down on the table. I was in a bus station. You signed my name. That is forgery. That is theft. It was family money, Diane shouted back. She stepped forward, her composure shattering. It was money left to this family. Clara was my sister. Do you think she would have wanted that money to sit in a bank account while her nephew went to prison? Do you think she would have wanted us to be ruined? It was left to me, I said, for college. You forfeited it, Diane screamed. The room went dead silent. What? I whispered. You forfeited it, Diane said, her voice dropping to a hiss. You left. You walked out on this family. You chose to be selfish. You chose to abandon us when we were drowning. You don't get to walk away and then claim the benefits of being a Cooper. That money belonged to the child who stayed, the child who needed saving. I stared at her. The twisted logic was breathtaking. She had convinced herself that my departure, which she engineered by kicking me out, justified the theft. So you punished me. I said, I survived. Diane corrected. I did what a mother had to do. I made the hard choice, and I would do it again. She looked at Mark, her eyes wild. You think she is some victim? She is cold. She has always been cold. She watched us struggle for years and never lifted a finger. She hoarded her grades. She hoarded her potential. And then she ran away. I just balanced the scales. Mark stepped forward. His face was dark with anger. She was a child. Mark said, she was a kid you threw away. You don't get to call her selfish for surviving you. Diane sneered at him. You don't know anything. You are just a mechanic. Frank stood up. Enough. The word was not loud, but it stopped the room. Frank Cooper walked to the center of the rug. He looked at Diane. He looked at her with a clarity I had never seen in his eyes before. I have seen the papers. Diane, Frank said. Diane rolled her eyes. Oh, Frank, don't start. You don't understand the finances. I understand that you lied to me, Frank said. His voice was shaking, but he kept going. You told me she took the money. You told me she didn't want us. I let her go because I thought she hated us. She did hate us, Diane said. Look at her. She brings a lawyer to her mother's house. She brings a lawyer because you are a criminal, Frank said. Diane gasped. She took a step back, as if he had struck her. I ignored it for a long time, Frank said. I ignored the letters that came back. I ignored the way you talked about her, because it was easier, because I am a weak man. Diane, and I wanted peace. He looked at me. Tears were streaming down his face. But I am not blind. I believe her. I believe she didn't sign those papers. And I believe we stole from her. Frank? Diane warned, her voice low. Don't, Frank said. Don't tell me what to do? Not anymore. Nia stepped forward. She placed a hand on the stack of documents. Mrs. Cooper, Nia said, her tone professional and icy. What you have just admitted, in front of witnesses, is sufficient to establish a pattern of fraud. We have the records. We have the testimony of your husband. If we take this to the district attorney, you are looking at charges for grand larceny, identity theft, and bank fraud. And given the amounts involved in the current development project, you could be looking at federal charges. Diane looked at the papers. She looked at Frank, who had turned his back on her. She looked at Mark, who was standing like a guard dog next to me. She realized, finally, that she was cornered. Her face changed. The anger vanished, replaced by a shrewd, calculating look. She set her drink down. Fine, she said. She walked to the desk in the corner of the room and opened a drawer. She pulled out a checkbook. How much? She asked. What? I said. How much do you want? Diane asked, uncapping a pen. You want the $25,000 back? Fine. I will write you a check right now. With interest. Let's call it $50,000. She scribbled on the check and tore it out. She held it out to me. $50,000. Sarah. It pays off your little debts. It helps Mark open his shop. She picked up a piece of paper from the desk, a document she had clearly prepared in advance. All you have to do is sign this. It is a standard non-disclosure agreement. It says that this was a misunderstanding, that you authorize the past transactions, and that you will not disparage the family or the development project. She waved the check. Take it. Go back to Baylark. Live your life. And we never have to speak again. I looked at the check. $50,000. It was more money than I had ever seen at one time. It would change our lives. Mark could quit his job. We could buy a house. I looked at Diane. She was smiling again. That tight, triumphant smile. She thought she had won. She thought everyone had a price. I looked at Mark. He didn't say a word. He just watched me, trusting me. I took the check from her hand. Diane's smile widened. Smart girl, she said. I ripped the check in half. Then I ripped it again. I let the pieces flutter to the floor. I don't want your money. Diane, I said. Diane's face went slack. Then what do you want? She whispered. You want to ruin us? You want to see your brother in jail? I want the truth. I said, I want you to write a statement. I want you to admit exactly what you did. I want you to admit that you stole my identity, that you lied to Dad, and that you used me to fix your mistakes. I want it notarized, and I want my name off that deed and off that development application. Today, Diane laughed. It was a sound of pure disbelief. You are insane. I will never write that. It would destroy me. Then I guess we go to court. I said. I turned to Nia. File the complaint. I said, wait, Diane shouted. I didn't stop. I walked out of the house. Mark and Nia followed me. We stood in the driveway. The night air was cold. You did good, Mark said. He squeezed my hand. Nia looked worried. She won't sign a confession. Sarah. She knows it is a prison sentence. She is going to fight dirty now. I know. I said, but I'm not hiding anymore. We drove back to the motel. Mark and I went up to the room. I felt drained, hollowed out, but also strangely light. I had said no to the money. I had broken the cycle. Mark went into the bathroom to shower. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked my phone. There was a new email. It was from an anonymous address. watcher1988@gmail.com. I opened it. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF. It was a scan of a document I had never seen before. It was a loan application for the new hard money loan, the high-interest one Kyle had told me about. The date was from last week. On the signature line for the co-borrower, there was a signature, Sarah E. Cooper, but this time, underneath the signature, there was a thumbprint, an ink thumbprint, and below the image, a single line of text had been typed into the email body, which I had missed at first glance. She lifted your print from a glass when you were at the cafe. She is not just forging your name anymore. She is planting forensic evidence. She will try to pin this on you. I dropped the phone on the bed. My hands were ice cold. She wasn't just using me. She was framing me. The next morning, the sky over Ridgehaven was a bruise-colored gray, heavy with rain that refused to fall. I sat in Nia Voss's conference room, watching the printer spit out pages. Each sheet contained a legal allegation that would detonate the life I had known. We were drafting a formal complaint. It was not a polite request anymore. It was a demand for a forensic accounting of the trust fund, a quiet title action to remove my name from the house, and a fraud alert sent to the lenders backing the North Ridgehaven development. I felt nauseous. "It is not too late to stop," I said, staring at the stack of paper. Nia looked up from her laptop. "If you stop now, Sarah, you are not just walking away, you are accepting liability. If that development project goes belly up, and with your mother's leveraged financing, it likely will, the creditors will not care that you were a victim. They will see your name on the application, and they will garnish your wages for the rest of your life." "I know," I said, "but I'm not afraid of losing the money. I am afraid of this." I gestured to the window, to the town outside. Diane had not been idle. Since I walked out of her house, the whispers had started. I had gone to get coffee that morning, and the barista, a girl I went to high school with, had barely looked at me. "When I paid," she murmured. "I heard you are trying to sue your mom. After everything she did for you." Diane was spinning the narrative. She was telling people that her greedy, estranged daughter had returned to extort money from the family just as they were trying to do something good for the town. She was painting me as the villain, and because she was the one sponsoring the gala, people believed her. I felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize, to disappear. Then Mark put his hand on my shoulder. "Let them talk," he said. "They are talking about a version of you that doesn't exist." We spent the morning finalizing the exhibits. Exhibit A, the forged loan document. Exhibit B, the trust fund withdrawal records. Exhibit C, the timeline of Kyle's settlement. At noon, my phone buzzed. It was Kyle. "Can I see you?" "Please, I am at the park. I met him at the old bandstand near the river." It was raining lightly now, a cold drizzle that slicked the wooden benches. Kyle was sitting alone, his head in his hands. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. "I am going to testify," he said without looking up. I stopped. "What?" "If you go to court," Kyle said, his voice thick, "I will tell the judge. I will tell them she told me to stay quiet. I will tell them she used the money to pay off the family." "Why?" I asked. "Why now?" "Because Tessa took the kids to her mother's," he said. He looked at me, his eyes red. "She said she couldn't stay in a house built on a lie. She said she didn't want our children to learn that money matters more than truth." He wiped his nose with his sleeve. "And there is something else. Something Mom said to me back then." "What did she say?" "When I asked her why she was using your money," Kyle said, "when I asked her why she was sacrificing you and not me, she said it was because you were strong." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. She said, "Sarah can take the hit. Sarah is tough. You are not." Kyle laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "She didn't steal from you because she hated you, Sarah. She stole from you because she respected you, and she protected me because she knew I was weak. She used your strength to subsidize my weakness." He looked at me, and I saw a man who had been hollowed out by being saved. "I am sorry I wasn't strong enough to stop her," he whispered. I didn't forgive him. I couldn't, but I nodded. "Come to Nia's office at 3. I said, "We are meeting with her lawyer." I drove back to the office. Frank was waiting in the lobby. He was holding a small, plastic-wrapped document. He looked like he had not slept in days. "I found this," he said, "in the attic, in her old filing cabinet." He handed it to me. It was a letter, yellowed with age. The handwriting was spidery and elegant. It was from Aunt Clara. It was dated a month before she died. "Dear Diane, I am setting up the trust for Sarah's education. I have instructed the bank that this is for her tuition only. I am writing this to you because I know how things get when Frank's business is slow. Do not touch this money. Diane. Sarah is the only one of them who has a chance to get out of Ridgehaven. Do not clip her wings to feather your own nest. If you do, I will haunt you. I read the letter twice. She was warned. Frank said quietly. Clara knew. She knew exactly who Diane was. And I pretended I didn't. He looked at me, his gray eyes steady for the first time in years. Burn her down. Sarah. She had her chance. At 3:00. The conference room at Nia's office was tense. Diane arrived 10 minutes late. She was flanked by a man in an expensive pinstripe suit, Arthur Sterling, the most aggressive litigator in the county. Diane wore black, looking mourning appropriate, as if she were the victim of a tragedy. She did not look at me. She sat down and smoothed her skirt. Let us make this quick, Mr. Sterling said, opening his briefcase. My client has a gala to attend. We are not here to waste time, Nia said. We are here to discuss the fraud. Mr. Sterling laughed humorlessly. Fraud is a strong word. Ms. Voss. We are here to discuss a family dispute regarding asset management. My client acknowledges that there were informalities in the paperwork years ago. However, given the statute of limitations, those are moot. He slid a document across the polished table. What is relevant is the current project. Your client is a listed stakeholder. That exposes her to liability. My client is generous enough to offer a solution. I looked at the document. It was titled Retroactive Ratification and Indemnity Agreement. Nia read it. Her eyebrows shot up. You cannot be serious. Nia said, What does it say? I asked. Nia looked at me. It says that you retroactively approve every signature your mother ever made in your name, treating them as authorized by a verbal power of attorney. It says you accept full legal status as a partner in the development project, and in exchange, Nia pointed to a paragraph at the bottom. In exchange, the trust creates a future distribution schedule that pays you 10% of the profits, provided the project remains solvent for 5 years. I looked at Diane. She was checking her watch. It is a good deal. Sarah, Diane said comfortably, you get equity, you get a payout. All you have to do is acknowledge that we were partners all along. It is a trap, I said. Diane sighed. Everything is a trap with you. It is a business arrangement. If I sign this, I said, looking at the text, I am validating the forgery. I am saying I gave you permission. Yes, Diane said, which cleans up the title issues. And if the project fails? I asked. If the EPA shuts you down? If the hard money lenders call the loan? Diane waved a hand. It won't fail. But if it does, I insisted, if I sign this, I am fully liable. I am not just a victim whose name was used. I am a willing participant. You are not offering me money. Diane, you are locking me into the burning building so you can sneak out the back. Diane's eyes narrowed. You are being paranoid. I looked at Arthur Sterling. Does your client know that I have an email? I asked. Sterling frowned. What email? The one from the Watcher. I said, I saw Diane's hand twitch. I pulled out my phone. I opened the PDF of the thumbprint scan. I slid the phone across the table to Sterling. Last week, my mother applied for a hard money loan. I said, she signed my name. Again. But this time, she didn't just trace the signature. She lifted a latent thumbprint from a glass I used at a cafe and transferred it to the document. Sterling looked at the phone. He zoomed in on the image. He went very still. That is a felony. Mr. Sterling, Nia said softly. And unlike the trust fund, this one happened 7 days ago. The statute of limitations is wide open. Sterling looked at Diane. Did you do this? He asked. Diane's face was a mask of stone. It is a forgery, she said. Someone is trying to frame me. Who? I asked. Who else has my thumbprint? Diane? Who else needed that loan to keep the auditors away? Diane slammed her hand on the table. I did it for us, she screamed. The poise shattered completely. I did it to keep the house, to keep the business. You ungrateful little— Mr. Sterling closed his briefcase. I think we are done here, he said. Sit down. Arthur, Diane snapped. Fix this. I cannot fix a new felony. Diane, Sterling said coldly. He stood up. I advise you to remain silent. He walked out of the room. Diane was left alone on her side of the table. She looked small suddenly. The power she wore like a coat had been stripped away. I looked at her. I had waited 15 years for this moment. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would feel joy. I just felt tired. Why? I asked. Diane looked up. Her eyes were hate-filled. Why what? Why was it so easy? I asked. Why was it so easy to throw me out? To use me? To steal from me? I was your daughter. Diane stared at me. She didn't blink. Because you weren't like me, she said. Her voice was chillingly ordinary. It wasn't angry. It was just a statement of fact. Kyle needed me. He needed my help. He needed my guidance. You? You watched me. You judged me. Even when you were 10 years old. You looked at me with those cold eyes like you saw right through me. She leaned forward. You didn't know how to obey. Sarah, you had your own mind, and people with their own minds are dangerous to the family. I had to cut you off before you infected the rest of them. I looked at her. You didn't cut me off. I said, you set me free. I stood up. We are filing. Nia, Sarah, wait. Diane said. Her voice rose to a panic. I didn't stop. I walked out of the conference room. Mark was waiting in the hall. He saw my face and he knew. He took my hand. We walked to the courthouse. It was only 2 blocks away. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was wet and shining. We stood at the filing window. The clerk took the papers. She stamped them. Received. The sound of the stamp was loud. It was the sound of a wall coming down. It is done, I said. We walked outside. Diane was waiting on the courthouse steps. She had run all the way from the office. Her hair was wet. Her mascara was smudged. Sarah, please, she begged. She grabbed my arm. Don't do this. The notice gets served tomorrow. Once it is public, the investors pull out. The gala is canceled. I lose the house. I lose everything. I pulled my arm away. You lost it 15 years ago. Diane, you just kept borrowing time. Sarah, think about the family. Kyle ran up behind her. He was out of breath. Sarah, please. She is willing to make a deal. She will unwind the filings. She will take your name off everything. Just drop the complaint. Let us survive. I looked at Kyle. I looked at the brother who had let me pay for his sins. I looked at Diane, the mother who demanded obedience and called it love. Mark squeezed my hand. Sarah, he said softly, it is up to you. What do you want? He didn't ask what I should do. He didn't ask what was fair. He asked what I wanted. I looked down at the receipt in my hand, the filing receipt. I looked at the town of Ridgehaven. The banners for Heritage Week were drooping in the damp air. I want the truth, I said. I turned to Diane. I am not dropping it. But you will destroy us, Diane shrieked. You will be the girl who destroyed her own mother. No, I said. I am the girl who survived her. I turned my back on them. I walked down the steps. I heard Diane screaming my name, a raw, desperate sound that echoed off the stone buildings. But I didn't turn around. I walked toward the car where Mark was waiting to drive us home, not to the house on Elm Street, to Baylark, to the apartment with the bakery smell, to the life I had built with my own hands, my own name, and my own money. I was not rich. I was not a stakeholder. I was just Sarah. And for the first time in 33 years, that was enough. Thank you for listening to Sarah's story. It is a hard road to walk when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below and tell me your city or country. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more narratives about justice, betrayal, and the long road to truth. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Sarah made the right choice by refusing the deal? I read every single one. Thank you for being here.